The Kings win while a star player gets benched. I'll give you my thoughts and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment wherever you get your podcast if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. You can start the season by joining FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the LA Kings played game number 9 of the NHL season this past Saturday afternoon against the Utah Hockey Club, the first of 3 meetings between the Kings and this new team in Utah, formerly the Arizona Coyotes. The Kings checked in with a 4-2-2 record. Utah Hockey Club was 4-3-1. As for the Kings starting lineup in this game against Utah, same forward group we've seen now for a while. Andre Kopitar centering the top line with Adrian Kempe and Quentin Byfield. Philip Deneau centering the second line with Trevor Moore and Kevin Fiala. Third line would be Alex Turcotte centering Alex Laferriere and Warren Foegele. And the fourth line would be Trevor Lewis centering Tanner Jeannot and Andre Lee. The defense would be quite a bit different. Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov on the top pairing. Gavrikov moving back up on the top pairing and off of his normal left side to the right side. The second pairing was Joel Edmondson and Brandt Clark. Kyle Burroughs out of the lineup from the previous game, and Edmondson and Clark were the third pairing in the previous game. They were moved up to the second pairing, and we had a new third pairing of Caleb Jones and Jordan Spence. So Jones inserted into the lineup, and Spence was dropped down from the first pairing to the third pairing. We'll comment more on this shuffling of the defensemen coming up a little later. In net, we would have the return of Darcy Kemper with David Riddick serving as the backup. Kemper back after missing 5 games with a lower body injury. He had a brief stint on injured reserve, but never looked like he would be out too long, and indeed, he wasn't out too long, 5 games. Healthy scratches were Akil Thomas, Kyle Burroughs, and Andreas Englund. So my big question going into the game against the Utah Hockey Club was, would the special teams be a positive or a negative? The answer was a positive. As far as the game summary quickly in this one, we would have a scoreless opening period. The Kings didn't score, but they did have a decent start in this game, I thought, and goalie Darcy Kemper looked like he hadn't missed any time at all due to the injury. Second period, the Kings would get the first goal of the game, grab a 1-0 lead on a Brandt Clark point shot on the power play to make it 1-0. Kings extend their lead to 2-0. Adrian Kempe with a shot on goal. Traffic in front. Rebound goes to defenseman Joel Edmondson, who would score. Now, Utah would answer to make it 2-1 after 2 periods, but in the third, Edmondson scores his second goal of the game, which is very unique. We'll tell you why in a moment. That made it 3-1. Utah would score the next goal, but get no closer, and the Kings skate off with a 3-2 win to improve to 5-2-2 on the season. As for the game stats in this one, Kings win at 3-2. Shots on goal favored Utah 26-23. As for the special teams, Kings were 1 for 3, while Utah was 0 for 3. So the Kings were a positive in the special teams. Faceoffs favored Utah 36-24. Hits favored the Kings 26-20. Block shots favored LA 15-13. So what's the big takeaway from this win over the Utah Hockey Club? That would be the Kings continue to find a way to win. Is it impressive? No. Does it give me a ton of confidence that eking out these wins over lesser competition is going to translate into the Kings playing well and winning against some of the top teams in the NHL? Not really. But 5-2-2 is 5-2-2. Would I prefer the Kings be winning by 3 to 4 goals, especially against teams like the Sharks? Yes, I would. But, right now, the Kings are finding a way to get it done, and it's hard to complain about that. Now, the Kings won this particular game getting no goals from forwards. And the defense has been a positive for sure as far as points and goals. But it's not sustainable. Hopefully, the defense, when it's all said and done, will be a supplement for the forwards offensively, which would be great. But the Kings need more production from their forwards. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But Kings getting wins and banking points, and that is important. A new we have a feature we always have about trying to get a quote from the head coach. I'm going to call it something different going forward, and that is quote the coach. What did Jim Hiller have to say after this latest game? He said, quote, "You've got to shoot to score, but I think what we've done better at this year, and it's something Blakey talked about in the press conference when I was hired, was we need to get a little dirtier around their net. I think if the goalie sees the puck, usually they're going to save it. We got some deflection goals too, and we've got some good screens. So it's a product of the forwards getting on that and the D obviously finding lanes and getting it in there." End quote. That was Jim Hiller after the win over Utah. And what was good from a team standpoint for the LA Kings, we'll talk more about the individuals coming up, but obviously exactly what Jim Hiller was talking about. Getting scoring from the blue line obviously is a good thing. Again, all 3 goals coming from defensemen. Kings were top 5 in the NHL getting points from the blue line coming into this game. Obviously, they didn't hurt that at all after this one. Now, something we are not accustomed to seeing is scoring from the blue line. But again, if that can be something that carries out throughout the season, obviously that's a plus. Honestly, though, I wouldn't bank on it. Now, getting offense from an unexpected source is always great. Now, Brant Clark gets his first of the season, though definitely not his last. As for Joel Edmondson, who knows what the odds are on him getting another 2-goal game? I would say it's slightly better than me having a 2-goal game this year. But again, when you have a player who does something unexpected in a positive way, always want to try and get a win when something like that happens. And the Kings obviously did that. Also talked about it. My question going in, special teams. They need to be a plus for the Kings more often than not, especially against the better teams in the NHL. But at any point, especially the way the Kings penalty kill and power play has been so far this season, both are not up to standard, but they were in this game. Anytime you can come out of a game for the Kings, being a plus in the special teams, that's going to help a lot. And again, they were +1 on the power play, even on the penalty kill, did not allow a power play goal. So that's obviously a positive for the LA Kings. And as Jim Hiller talked about, all 3 goals were scored and affected by Kings players going to the net. The Brant Clark power play goal, Alex Laferriere is in front of the net. He draws defenders to him as well. That's more bodies in front. Clark gets off the wrist shot from the point. It goes off the stick of the Utah defender and in the net. The Edmondson first goal, Kopitar and Byfield in front of the net. Shot from the point, goes off bodies. Kopitar gets his stick on it. It goes over to Edmondson, who's there to crash the net and put it in. And the Edmonton second goal, Kopitar and Clark in front of the net. Traffic all over the place. Puck hits off legs and goes in. Again, that's exactly what Jim Hiller talked about. It was exactly what Rob Blake, as he referred to, talked about in the offseason. The Kings being dirtier, more aggressive around their net. Those are blue-collar goals. Those are goals that never go into a slump, right? Going to the net and getting shots from the point. That's always something a team can do and should be looking to do. And the Kings definitely benefited from that mindset in the win over Utah. Definitely need to see more of that going forward. That was a good sign. So what was not so good for the Kings from a team standpoint in this one? Well, I said after the win over the Sharks that we needed to see more from our top 6 forwards. Well, now it's 3 games in a row and we have had no goals from our top 6. It's either been defensemen or the Turcotte line. Now, to credit the Kings, they won 2 of those 3 games, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. Those guys in the top 6, the top 2 lines, that's where we're getting most of our offense from. So those guys need to get it going soon. Encouraged that the Kings have been able to win a couple of games without that, but that's something that needs to get going here very, very soon, especially with a game coming up against Vegas this week. We're going to have to get some production out of those top 6 guys if we're going to win a game against a team like that. Up next, we look at some individuals from this latest win over the Kings, including a standout player getting benched. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go onto the PrizePick app, make your picks now, and you could be a winner. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on action in most states, including California. Download the PrizePick app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's get to some individual performances from the Kings win over the Utah Hockey Club over the weekend. Let's start with goalie Darcy Kemper. Obviously back from the injury. I thought he looked very sharp right away. It didn't look like he had missed any time at all. Very solid 3 periods from him. The one goal he allowed, the first goal he allowed, I would say that was a stoppable goal. It was from a little bit of distance, one from kind of a sharp angle. But a little controversy on that, which I'll get into in a moment. The second goal, Joel Edmondson allowed the Utah player to get position on him in the crease. He gets his stick on it and a deflection on a pass into the crease. That's on Edmondson. He had a great game, and we'll talk about our 3 stars coming up. He's one of them. But that was not a good play by Joel Edmondson. He's got to be way stronger in front of his net. Can't let guys get into the paint and get position. So I don't put that one on Darcy Kemper. So one of the goals of the 2 that he allowed, one of the goals of the 2 Darcy Kemper allowed was stoppable, but all in all, a solid performance from Darcy Kemper in net, especially considering his first game back from injury. He finished with 2 goals allowed on 26 shots. I'd call it a B game for Darcy Kemper, but I would say generally speaking that performance is good enough for the Kings to get a win. I want to talk about Brandt Clarke, and I want to thank him for making me look so good. I've talked about it before. I will repeat it. I love his little wrist shots from the point. Not hard, but very accurate. Just get it onto the net and good things happen, or get it towards the net and good things will happen. He did it on his first goal of the season. His head is always up, puck on his stick, and constantly looking for the right moment to flip that puck on net and get it into a high danger area again for a deflection or a rebound. And that's exactly what happened on the first goal of the game. 9 games for Brandt Clarke this season. He's got 7 points, 1 goal, 6 assists, tied for the team in scoring, #1 amongst defensemen. Clark's on pace for 64 points right now, and honestly, I think that's doable for him. His defensive game also, I did want to point out, I think it's getting better. I think it's more consistent. I think specifically, though, when he does make a mistake, he also can erase it pretty quickly. There was specifically a play in the first period. He had a careless turnover, but he immediately comes right back and makes a great defensive play to make up for it. So I like the progression we're seeing from Brandt Clarke. Quinton Byfield, I thought he had a couple of nice power moves to the net in this one, but didn't get a shot off. It seems like his legs are there, but for some reason his hands aren't at this point. Hopefully that does come around. He did have an assist in this game, a secondary assist on the Edmondson first goal. He was around the net and active, but still waiting for his first goal of the season. Q with 4 assists in 9 games. Hopefully he gets that first goal soon. I think he needs it for his confidence. I'm not panicking about Quinton Byfield, but again, he's a part of that top 6 that we need to see a little bit more from offensively going forward. All right, let's get into it. Kevin Fiala. He had a real good chance on the Kings' first power play. He then got called for 2 penalties, the second one late in the second period, and that was it. His night was over. Kevin Fiala benched by head coach Jim Hiller, who said before the game he was going to start holding players accountable for taking bad penalties, and he was a man of his word. Now, for just a moment, though, I'm actually going to stick up for Kevin Fiala, which might be a little bit weird because I've been calling him out lately as far as his play and the penalties he's been taking. But I want to be fair, and I thought both penalties called on Kevin were questionable, in my opinion. Now, the first one was just flat out bizarre. He lifted the stick of a Utah player. They were both away from the puck, and the stick went flying out of the guy's hands. He didn't slash it. He lifted it, and the player lost his stick. I would say he needs to hold on to his stick a little tighter than that. But they called Kevin for interference, which is a bizarre call. it was, to me, I think you play on that. But even if you do call it, okay, but then you have to call it consistently, because later in the game, Kings defenseman Mikey Anderson had his stick knocked out of his hands in a very similar fashion, and the referees didn't call it. And it helped Utah keep the puck in the zone, and shortly thereafter, they scored their first goal of the game. Now, the Kings should have been on a power play if the referee is consistent, and I don't complain about officials that much. But regardless of the sport, all you ask from the officials is that they are consistent. If you're going to call it on one team, you got to call it on the other team. If you're going to call it tight for both teams. If you're going to let them play for both teams. So they didn't do that in this case. And I thought that was some baloney, some fertilizer, to say the least. That said, even though both penalties on Kevin Fiala, the second penalty, Fiala was called for a cross-check. It's one of those cross checks you see a million times in a game. The player didn't even react to it. He didn't go down to a knee. It wasn't necessary. But again, you see it all the time. The problem was Kevin broke his stick when he cross checked the guy. It got the attention of the referee, and he thought in his mind, I guess, well, if it was forceful enough to break his stick, then it must have been a penalty. And so he called a penalty. Again, that was kind of bad luck. Having said all that, the penalties were still called. Both the penalties weren't necessary. It wasn't like he was battling for a puck and he got his stick up or something along those lines. They were unnecessary. He didn't have to lift that guy's stick away from the play. He didn't have to cross-check that guy on a play that didn't have any bearing on what was going on. So you could still say, even though they were questionable, they were unnecessary. And Kevin's had a history of this, and Jim Hiller had said before the game, we're taking too many penalties, and if it continues, then guys are going to start getting benched. And he was a man of his word, and it was the perfect opportunity for Jim Hiller to be a man of his word. Now, if the Kings are down 3-1 in the third period and this happens, does he bench Kevin Fiala? I don't know. But up 3-1 at home with just over one period left to go in the game, it made it a great time to send a message to both Kevin Fiala and the team. If you take unnecessary penalties, if you put us shorthanded unnecessarily, you are going to get benched. And I think Kevin Fiala, frankly, needed this. How he responds to this, we'll see. I think, look, he's a pro. This is not the first time this has happened to him. He's still an asset on the team. But again, it was the right message to send to him specifically. It was the right message to tell the team as well. If you take these kinds of penalties, you're going to sit. And he didn't play the entire third period. As for what Jim Miller had to say afterwards, not much specifically, but he said, quote, well, I'll talk about this because we've talked about it. I think after the last game, we're taking too many penalties. That's clear. So you can't take that many penalties. And when you show up more than once or twice or three times, then the coach has to do something, end quote. So again, not going specific and calling out Kevin Fiala, but also saying exactly what he had said. We're taking too many penalties. If it keeps happening, then I have to do something. And he did. It was absolutely the right call. Good job by Jim Hiller of standing by his words. It was also the perfect situation to be able to do this. And I thought it was absolutely the right call by Jim Hiller. Well done for a first-year head coach. Never easy to bench a standout player like that. But again, it was the perfect circumstance. It was the right call. And I think Kevin Fiala will respond to it properly. He's been around the block. He's not a kid. Hopefully any player that gets benched, it's embarrassing, and you want your ice time. You want to go out there and you want to get your stats, and you want to be a player that matters. And when you do that and you kind of put yourself over the team, then the message is sent, and you got to make up for it. And I think Kevin Fiala will get the message and be a positive because of it. And I think he'll be fine. And again, it was the right call by Jim Hiller. Real quick, I did want to mention the defensive group. I know this is the second period after a game is where we talk about individual players, but I thought kudos to the entire group of defensemen for the Kings, and not just because they scored all the goals in this one, but we saw a shuffling of the pairs again. And we know that without Drew Doughty, it's going to be a bit of a mashup for the LA Kings for a while. I actually like this kind of mixing up the lines, maybe even game by game. keeping the guys kind of fresh, keeping them on their toes. They're not going to worry about who they're playing with or where, just worry about their game. And I think this kind of helps with that if that's what Jim Miller is trying to do. I thought Caleb Jones got inserted into the lineup on the third pairing. I thought he did a very good job. Nothing spectacular, as you would expect from a guy like him, but just played a solid defensive game, fit in very well. And I think he let Jim Hiller know that if he needs Caleb Jones, that he can respond and get the job done. So the only thing I do wonder, and I'll harp on this very quickly one more time, I like the mixing up of the defense. I don't know why Jim Hiller doesn't do that with the fourth line. Why not rotate Trevor Lewis, Andre Lee, Tanner Jeannot, and Akil Thomas? 9 games into the season, and Akil Thomas has still not seen the ice. I don't get it. I would like to see him do that, do some sort of a rotation with the fourth line as well. All right, coming up next, we give out our 3 stars for the win over Utah, talk about the Pacific Division, and give you a rain report. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And, of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on Major League Baseball's postseason. Oh, by the way, the Dodgers taking on the Yankees in Game 3 of the World Series tonight. Dodgers are underdogs. They are getting a run and a half in Game 3 in the Bronx. The over-under in this game is 8.5. Dodgers are a plus 400 to win it all, as they lead that series 2-0. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, it's time for one of my favorite portions of the show after a Kings game and victory, and that is our 3 stars of the night. The number 3 star for your LA Kings, going to go with Adrian Kempe. 2 assists. He had the primary assist on the Clark goal and a secondary assist on the Edmondson goal. But we talk about, not getting the goal scoring right now from the top 6, but that doesn't mean that some of the guys aren't still contributing. And Adrian Kempe is certainly one of those guys. Also always there with his defensive game as well. But Kempe with a couple of nice jobs of distributing the puck in that win over Utah. He's our number 3 star. Number 2 star is defenseman Brant Clark, scoring his first goal of the season. Also picked up a secondary assist on the second Edmondson goal. Great to see Brant Clark continuing to progress early in the season and getting better and better. But obviously the number 1 star is Joel Edmondson with his 2 goals, first 2 as a King, and his first 2-goal game of his NHL career. I had mentioned on social media, I go, there's no way Joel Edmondson has scored an NHL hat trick. And he had plenty of time to do it, but didn't get too many shots the rest. So I think he only had 1 shot the rest of the way. But a first 2-goal game for Joel Edmondson. He had 1 goal all of last season. So in 1 game, let's just call it, it's a career game for Joel Edmondson. If he scores 2 more goals the rest of the way, I'll be surprised. Love to see it. But again, Joel Edmondson, he's had a pretty positive impact on the Kings so far. Nothing spectacular. He hasn't been quite as physical as I thought he would be, but he is playing a solid game. I'm still not a huge fan of his contract, but what it is. Joel Edmondson certainly is an upgrade when he's on that third pairing, but did a great job in this one, and good to see it. The new dad, 2 goals, his first 2 as an LA King, and Joel Edmondson, likely for the only time this season, will be our number 1 star of the game, but good for him. Quick look at the Pacific Division. Right now, the Vegas Golden Knights are leading the Pacific. They've got a record of 6-2-1 for 13 points. They've won 3 games in a row, beat the Kings, beat the Senators, and beat the Sharks. They've scored 19 goals in their last 3 games. So scoring, not an issue for the Vegas Golden Knights right now, your top team in the Pacific Division. This second place team is our LA Kings, 5-2-2, 12 points, just 1 point out of first place. They went 2-1 over the last week, lost to Vegas, but beat San Jose and Utah. Calgary Flames have cooled off a bit, no pun intended. 5-2-1 on the season, 11 points, 1 point back of the Kings for third place. They went 1-2 after a red hot start to the season. Again, no pun intended. They beat Pittsburgh this past week, but then lost to Carolina and Winnipeg. So some good teams they played. The Canucks right now are your 4th place team in the Pacific, 4-1-2 for 10 points. They were 2-0 over the past week with wins over the Blackhawks and Penguins. The Oilers starting to get going a little bit. They are currently in 5th place in the division with 9 points, 4-4-1 overall, 2-0-1 the past week. They lost to Carolina in overtime, then beat Pittsburgh and Detroit. The Kraken also with a 4-1-1 record, also 9 points, although they went 0-2-1 this week, lost to Colorado and Carolina, and then lost in overtime to Winnipeg. The Ducks are in 7th place, 3-4-1, 7 points. They went 1-2 over the past week. They lost to the Rangers and to New Jersey. And the Sharks, 0-7-2, only 2 points. No wins so far this year for the Sharks. 0-3 this past week. Losses to the Ducks, Kings, and Golden Knights. And the San Jose Sharks will be the next opponent for our LA Kings coming up on Tuesday. Hopefully we can keep that winless streak intact. I did want to give you a quick rain report. The Ontario Reign, the Kings AHL affiliate, lost on the road to the Coachella Valley Firebirds on Friday. They were down 3-0 in the first period. Sean Element, a new Ontario Reign player, scored his first ever goal with the Reign, got him on the board, but the Reign trailed 4-1 after 2. Third period, Francesco Pinelli did score his first of the season to make it 4-2, but Ontario would get no closer in a 5-2 loss. Phoenix Copley was in net his first game of the season for Ontario. He allowed 4 goals on 39 shots. And then the Reign lost Sunday at home against the Henderson Silver Knights. 5-1 the final. Atu Yemsen, the only goal for the Reign. Phoenix Copley once again in net, taking the loss. Eric Portillo still out with that illness. It's been a while for him. But for Copley, he allowed 5 goals on 22 shots. So not a great start to the season for the Ontario Reign. They are now 1-4 so far this year. Before we sign off, I did want to give a quick shout out to a couple of guys who stopped me on the way to the Utah Kings game. And I apologize for not remembering the names, but they were twin brothers. Guys could not have been nicer. They seemed embarrassed that they stopped me to talk to me. Don't be embarrassed. I love talking to fans. I love talking to Kings fans, and certainly love talking to fans of this show. So to the twins with their Kopitar jerseys, it was awesome to meet you guys. I apologize for not remembering the names, but great to see you guys. Thank you for stopping me and saying hello. And if anybody ever sees me walking around the crypto.com arena before or after a game or during a game, please say hi. I'd love to say hi to you guys. And if you want to actually meet up, you can send me an email. You can send me a message on social media. I will be at the Kings Golden Knights game on Wednesday as a fan. So that'll be fun. I like to go to a couple games a year as a fan, not as a media person, so I can cheer and have a good time. And then on Saturday, I will be at the Kings Blackhawks game, another Saturday afternoon game. I'll be there as a member of the media. So if you guys are going to any of those games, you want to meet up, you want to say hi, absolutely, please let me know. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on tomorrow's show, we will preview that Kings matchup against the Sharks. Wednesday, we'll recap that game and preview that Knights Kings Golden Knights game. Thursday, recap Kings Golden Knights round 2. And then Friday, of course, we will have our Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get in on that, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. We always welcome your thoughts there. Also, if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section, we'd love for you to comment. And if you want to stay connected with the show on social media, we are on Twitter, X, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.